front of it, so you should be straight. National Trust Talks. I'm really excited today. This is the first time I'll be hosting our Trust Talks. My name's Miles Darrell. I'm the Conservation Officer here at the Bermuda National Trust. And I'm going to just ask you to bear with me for a bit while I do a little check on things. Jordan is our moderator. She's in the background taking care of some tech stuff. And Jordan, can you just let me know that you can hear me?
Yeah, you're all good.
Okay, perfect. So everyone, I want to thank you again for coming and share with you that I am very excited. We have got Dr. Tom Iliffe here today, and he has brought a lot of joy to my life of recent as I've learned a lot about caves and Bermuda's cave systems. Before I get right into that though, I want to just cover a little bit of housekeeping. Firstly, I'm just going to ask you to keep your microphones on mute throughout the duration of the talk, just so that it's easy for Dr. Iliffe to keep going and not lose his rhythm. I know you're probably going to have questions. I know I have had a lot, and I've had the benefit of speaking with Dr. Iliffe privately. And I'm just going to ask that you write your questions into the chat, and I will make sure that they get addressed at the end, and I will ask the questions on your behalf so that it is consistent for Dr. Iliffe and easy. That has been the request. So with that, I'd just like to give you a little insight. Dr. Iliffe is the professor of marine biology at the Texas A&M University. He lived in Bermuda for 11 years between 1977 and 1988. And worked as a research associate at BIOS, which was previously known as the Bermuda Biological Station. During his time here, he became intrigued and excited about caves and comprehensively studied Bermuda's cave systems and their inhabitants during that time and many visits that would happen following that. Now, I only recently met Dr. Iliffe in the last month as I was seeking assistance in understanding what I now realize is the phenomenal value of Bermuda's caves, both locally and internationally in the scientific communities. I really needed this information because recently the National Trust has put through an objection to a proposal to destroy the Wilkinson Quarry Cave in Hamilton Parish. And Dr. Iliffe provided a lot of insight so as to provide the best objection possible. We needed to do that because the loss of any cave and its inhabitants is a big deal. It's recognized by the protection of endangered species that are found in it, and also that habitat is recognized in the Planning Act, which recognizes that it should be taken, its protection should be taken as precedent over all other planning laws. So with that, I want you to know that all in all, I came to find out we're all sitting on top of something very special, very rare, something that we definitely need to protect, and something that I know moving forward I will cherish, and I hope so will you. So without further ado, I'm going to let Dr. Iliffe take over here and share his insight, his understanding, and his great wealth of knowledge. Thank you, Dr. Iliffe.
Thank you so much, Miles. So it's a real pleasure to be able to talk to you today. Very nice to see a good audience here. I recognize quite a few names in the audience. So I'm going to talk today about some of the work that I've done and have been doing, have been active in studying the caves of Bermuda and the cave animals of Bermuda. So we're going to talk about that, some of the good things, and some of the questions that we've tried to solve. And then I'm going to go into some of the problems that are facing the island as far as caves and the animals exclusively living in those caves. So let's move through this. So what's so special about, first of all, Bermuda to me, and in light of the caves and what amazes me, what have we discovered in Bermuda's caves? What are the caves like? What amazing things do we find in the caves? And what are the strange types of rare animals that inhabit these cave systems? So we'll talk about all those things. We'll talk about what mysteries remain to be solved, some of the questions that we're trying to still get answers to. And we're going to talk about what's happening now to caves and cave animals in Bermuda. And finally, we'll talk about what can be done to prevent the critically endangered animals that inhabit these caves from becoming extinct. So let's talk about Bermuda, first of all. Bermuda, to me, is amazing because of its volcanic origin 30 or more million years ago out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It arose as a volcanic island, a volcanic seamount erupting out in the middle of the Atlantic. When the volcano stopped, there was probably a volcano, a mountain here that was a mile high or more. Gradually, over thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years, the top of that volcano became sorted or paired off, and we have a flat top that you see in Bermuda today. So what did the Earth look like when Bermuda formed? This was what the world looked like about 30 million years ago. It's amazingly different. There's a lot of things that we see that are very different from the planet Earth today. So the Atlantic Ocean pretty much looks the same, but we have an open Caribbean seaway connecting directly between the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. And we have an opening through where the Mediterranean is today and North Africa is today into the Indian Ocean. So there were connections all over the ocean. A lot of land was underwater. There was a canal or channel between Europe and Asia. So a lot of things were different. The entire Florida Peninsula was underwater. A lot of things happening. So we're going to fast forward now from 30 million years ago to the period of the ice ages. This occurred during the last 1 to 2 million years. And during the ice ages, sea level bounced up and down. So here's a chart up on the top of what sea level did. Can you see my marker there, Miles? Do you see my cursor?
I do see your cursor.
Good. Okay. So here's today, and then we're going to go back in time, going from right to left. 18,000 years ago was the last time sea level was down, and it was down about 115 to 120 meters below what it is today. It came up, and the last time it was at current levels was about 110,000 years ago. It dropped back down to 120 meters below current sea levels, bounced around a little bit, and about a little over 300,000 years ago, was back up to where it nearly is today, down and up. So about every 100,000 years or so ago, there was a major up and down of sea level. And this was caused by glaciers on the continents. There was so much ice tied up in glaciers on the continents that sea level dropped down 100 meters or more. So this was the impetus. Changing climate led to changing sea levels on Earth, and this impacted Bermuda and Bermuda's caves. So during the last ice age, 18,000 years ago, Bermuda sea levels were 110 meters lower than they are today. So if you would have come up to Bermuda, here would have been sea level, and the entire top and pedestal in Bermuda would have been dry land. Today, sea level has come up and flooded the top of the platform, except for the limestone dune islands of Bermuda. And so there's been significant changes as sea level bounced up and down. As far as the land area of Bermuda, Bermuda would have been a much larger island during the ice ages, and today is much smaller land area. So another thing that interests me is the isolated location of Bermuda. So here's a nice map that I find is amazing up at the top here. And here we have the location of Bermuda out here in the North Atlantic. And we have this long mountain range, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, that separates the eastern side from the western side of the Atlantic Ocean. So Bermuda is pretty much the only island that's out here in the Atlantic Ocean. It's a long way from anywhere else. It's about 5,000 kilometers away from the Canary Islands, where I've done a lot of work on volcanic caves there. It's about 1,400 kilometers away from the Bahamas, another place that there's a large number of caves and cave animals I've studied. And as far as the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, it's about 2,000 kilometers away. So there's nothing that's close by. And that's interesting to me because it raises questions as how did animals get to Bermuda? When did they arrive in Bermuda? And by what means? So Bermuda does have some nearby neighbors. So there's the Bowditch Seamount that's located about 1,300 meters deep below the surface of Bermuda on the northern side of the island. And then a little closer, there's Challenger Bank and Argus Bank. These are much shallower. These are about 50 meters deep. And we're going to talk about some work that we did on Challenger Bank a little bit later in the talk. So where are caves in Bermuda located? Mostly in the area around Harrington Sound. So the primary area is on the northern and the eastern side of Harrington Sound, but there are caves spread in other places around the Sound, generally located in areas where there is a shorter distance between the Sound and between waters of the North Shore or waters of the South Shore of the island. So let's take a look at the caves. So one of the best known wild caves, wild meaning non-commercial, non-tourist caves in Bermuda is a cave called Walsingham Cave. I'm sure that probably a number of you have been to Walsingham Cave. I can see Gil Nolan there grinning. He knows this cave well, worked on it with me. Church Cave has the largest cave lake in Bermuda. It's an amazing cave, beautiful, beautiful clear water, very stunning location, and it's another site that we've done a lot of work and diving in. There's caves all around the coastline of Bermuda, and these caves breathe. So they inhale and exhale water with the tides. So every 6 hours, the tides in these systems change. So 6 hours, they inhale, water gets sucked into them, and for 6 hours, they exhale and water flows out. Here, you can see a cave along the North Shore of Bermuda, not far from Grotto Bay, that has a strong outflow of water on the outgoing tide. Now, in the caves, we've discovered by diving, there's vast networks of subterranean submerged passageways that extend beneath Bermuda and that interconnect many otherwise isolated cave pools around the island. So we had a little joke that someday in Bermuda, if we do enough exploring, somebody's going to come over and ask our exploration team, well, how many caves are there in Bermuda? And we'll say, gee, there's only one cave, but it's 100 miles long. So we're working on that. We still haven't got to that point, but we have found some amazing discoveries and incredibly long networks of cave passages tying up and intersecting multiple caves. Now, another very unusual thing about Bermuda caves is that there are abundant stalactites and stalagmites. Now, stalactites and stalagmites are formed by dripping water, so they only form in dry, air-filled caves. So the fact that we find them in the underwater caves is absolute proof that these caves must have been dry for very long periods of time. And this occurred during the ice ages, of course, when sea level was much lower and all of the cave systems were dry. So there's some really huge stalagmites that occur. Here we see a diver that's swimming between two of them. And to get a rough idea of how long the caves were dry during the ice ages and how old the caves are, it takes very approximately about 100 years to form 1 cubic inch of stalactite or stalagmite. So figure out, estimate how many cubic inches are in either one of these massive stalagmites, and from that, you'll get an idea of how old these cave systems are. It's immensely old. There have been here for many hundreds of thousands, if not millions years old, but they can't be older than the limestone. So we can't have a cave before there were limestone. All of the caves are in limestone around the island. So the limestone itself is a couple millions of years old. Most of the limestone where we find caves is the Walsingham limestone unit, which is probably the oldest limestone that we know on the island, and that's about 1 million to 2 million years old. So below the limestone, if we drilled straight down at a depth of 100 feet or so, we'd come into volcanic rock. And so there's no place you can go on Bermuda today and actually see the volcanic rock. We've tried in our diving. We hope that one day we'd be able to find a deep enough cave passage that would reach that 100-foot depth and take us to the volcanic rock that hasn't been observed or hasn't been on the surface for a couple million years at the very latest. And so we've got down to a depth of a little more than 80 feet, but unfortunately, that's the deepest cave passage we found. But what does the volcanic rock look like? Here's what volcanic rock looks like. So this is the core of volcanic rock, very solid, very hard, very dense rock, doesn't have a lot of cracks or pores in it. There's pores, but they're not interconnected pores. Now, I'd go ahead and pass this around the room, but I don't want anybody to drop it on their toes. Okay, so this is kind of what we're dealing with as far as Bermuda. So when we began diving, we found in our diving explorations, the deeper waters of the cave are salt water. So the surface waters are brackish, a mixture of fresh and salt. But as we go deeper and deeper, we get into the same strength salt as we find in the ocean. And it was in these deeper waters exclusively that there are a wide range of animals adapted to and inhabiting this cave habitat. So they're blind, depigmented species. We know of at least 66 species, and undoubtedly there are many more. Most of these are crustaceans. Nearly all are endemic, so endemic means they're found exclusively in Bermuda and only in the deeper salt waters of the caves. Most have small population sizes. Some we know of fewer than 10 individuals of given species that we've ever seen. Most occur only in a few caves or in specific areas, very specific areas in a cave. So when we say an animal is found in a certain cave, that in many ways is misleading because they're only found in a tiny part of that one cave. Most represent new higher groups of animals. They're new genera, new families, or even new orders. To give you an idea about an order, the order primates, which includes all the apes, the monkeys, including humans, are primates. The marsupials are an order, so all the Australian mammals, from kangaroos to wallabies to you name it, over in Australia are mammals, marsupials. So we discovered in the caves a new order of animals living. This is immensely exciting. Closest relatives of many of these cave animals are found on opposite sides of oceans, opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean, or some of them, their closest relatives are found in the deep sea. Now, Bermuda is a global hotspot for subterranean biodiversity. So it's extremely unique, unusual place because we have more cave animals in Bermuda than we have in very few other places in the world. 20 of the species, 20 of the 66 species, have been internationally listed, though as critically endangered. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. So here's a few of the animals that we have from the caves. And these are animals that many of them are very rare species. They're restricted distributions, and they're potentially critically endangered species. So on the top, the red shrimp is Parhippolyte sterreri, named after Wolfgang Sterr, who for many years was the director of the Bermuda Biological Station. And it's amazing, and it's closely related to cave shrimp from islands across the South Pacific Ocean, ranging from Hawaii to many islands going further west. I had the honor of having a cave shrimp named after me. Iliffe belongs to a group of cave shrimp that occur in opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean. So they occur in caves around the Mediterranean, as well as a number of caves on islands in the Caribbean, such as Bermuda, the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, Cuba, etc. But the closest relative for the Bermuda cave species is actually a cave shrimp from Zanzibar on the Indian Ocean. So how do you get from Zanzibar to Bermuda? That's quite a stretch. Maybe there's a cave goes all the way through, but although we've been looking, we have yet to find it. On the top, we have an amphipod that's called Pseudonophargus grandimanus. Closest relatives from this eyeless, colorless amphipod occur in caves in the Eastern Atlantic and the Mediterranean, but it's found nowhere in the Caribbean or anywhere in the Western Atlantic. So somehow this tiny, blind, cave-adapted amphipod got most of the way across the Atlantic Ocean to end up in Bermuda, but never got just that little bit further to arrive in caves in the Caribbean or caves in the US or anywhere else. Myctocheirus salopi down on the bottom, is the animal I told you about that represents a new order called Myctacia. It contains only a single species. So one species makes up the entire order Myctacia. When we first collected these animals, I sent them to a very eminent scientist at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington and said, well, what do you think of this? What kind of animal is it? Because nobody could recognize it. And he looked at it, poked and prodded, turned it over, wrote back to me and said, hey, Tom, I've never seen anything like this in my life. So when you have world experts say that you've got them amazed and stumped, that's pretty good. You found something that's really important. So one of the questions we began to have is, we know the caves in Bermuda were dry for many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. So where did the cave animals live? What was Ice Age Bermuda like? And we know that the caves in Bermuda are in the limestone. The limestone is a maximum of about 100 feet thick, but sea level around Bermuda was down nearly 400 foot below current levels. So where were there a habitat for cave animals to live? And so we had a project funded by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to do a 3-part search for caves around Bermuda. So part 1 was to map around the island of Bermuda, and we used high-resolution sonar to map the area between basically 200-foot water depths and 600-foot water depths. So if you look, there is a colored line that goes around here. This colored line is the water depths between 200 feet and 600-foot depths. And so we mapped the entire perimeter of the Bermuda Island. Now, the blue line is supposedly this same water profile depth going around Bermuda according to the maps. And there's a number of locations where you can see that our position for it and what's shown on the nautical charts is quite different. So we've found that the nautical charts aren't absolutely correct for some of the areas around the edge of Bermuda. So we did the entire perimeter of Bermuda, and we also mapped most of the way around Challenger Bank. And that was very interesting, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So we wanted to see what Bermuda looked like, what the edge of Bermuda looked like, and from this we got a lot of information, and we found some amazing things. So we found some submarine landslides along the edge of Bermuda. There's places where large pieces of the island have calved away and slid down the slope. So the red here at the top is shallower depths, about 200 foot. And as we go down into the blues and purple down at the bottom, we're getting down to 600 foot plus depths. So the green right here is about 300 to 400 feet deep. And there's places here where the side of the island has slid away. And one of the more interesting and unusual discoveries is we found out that we got proof for the Bermuda Triangle. So here on the side of the island, we have a face carved in the side of the island at depths between about 300 and 500 foot water depths that you can very clearly see the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So who would have carved a figure in the side of Bermuda other than some extraterrestrials or somebody living in Bermuda 18,000 years ago? So some interesting observations. And then we went back to our map going around Bermuda, and we marked on it points of interest. So where are there potential cave locations is what we were looking for. Are there caves? Are there holes in the edge of the island? And where are they located? Well, you can see that there's a large accumulation of sites around the northern and the western side of the island, but virtually none along the south shore. But if you look at Challenger Bank, all of the sites and a large number of sites clustered there were all along the southern side and the eastern side of Challenger Bank. So there was a big difference between the main side of Bermuda, where there was nothing on the southeastern side, and the Challenger Bank, where everything was on the southeastern side and nothing was on the northern and western side. So quite a bit of difference there between Challenger Bank and Bermuda itself. So we took these. Here is POI. POI stands for point of interest, and we numbered them. So this was 409. So Challenger Bank, 409 point of interest. And here's what the side of Challenger Bank looks like. Again, we've got red being about 200-foot water depths and dropping down to 600-foot water depths. Now, we can do a lot with our mapping technology here. We can actually go in and, we can take a slice and we can cut a slice, which is amazing. And we can take that slice and flip it around. And the black areas are places where our sonar beam, high resolution sonar beam, has just vanished and disappeared. So we want to see why it disappeared. Is there a potential cave there? And if we look at this particular spot right here and we turn it around, we see at a depth of about 120 meters, we have a very large gap. And this gap goes from about 115 meters depth to 122 meters depth. So there's about a 20-foot high hole here in the side of Bermuda. And this is where our sonar beam is being lost. So is there a cave there? Is there a hole there? We need to find out. And if we look along the edge here, you can see that there is just a large number of black places and voids that are in this area around the island. So this is what Challenger Bank looked like. If we got to North Rock, we found POI, point of interest 67. That's in a little shallower depths. This is in about 200-foot water depths. You can see it's right on the margin here between the orange and the yellow. So a little over 200-foot depths. And if we take our slice again here, we turn it on the side, we've got a sizable hole here. And then we have another hole just above it. So this is quite interesting. And this is in a little more manageable depth. So we said, boy, we've got to go and take a look at it. So we needed to put together a team. And so we recruited a team of experts to come out and help us with this project and actually go diving. So we wanted to go, we used closed circuit rebreathers and we used mixed gases to be able to do some very deep dives. So here's our team. Okay, so we're ready to go diving. So we're out diving now off, this is going down. Take a look at the site, POI 67, the one at North Rock, just offshore from North Rock. We're getting kitted up here. This is Brian Kakuk and Brett Gonzalez here assisting, getting ready to make our first dives. So when we dove down to this site, wow, there's actually a cave there, an amazing cave, 200 feet deep underwater at Bermuda. This was the first time, to my knowledge, that anyone had ever found caves that were offshore from the island. And so here's what it looked like inside the cave. Unfortunately, it was just a short archway. It was about maybe 100, 150 feet long, and there was another collapse in it that blocked off the rest of the tube. So it looked like at one time that there was a long cave here, probably not much coverage of rock above it, but most of the cave had collapsed in and only a small section remains. So this is what we saw in the cave doing our dives. So we thought, that went well, let's go to another point. So here's POI 80. This is at the northeastern end of Bermuda, and here we're dropping down a bit deeper. We're going to over 300-foot water depths here. So here we find a lot of dark areas. We take our slice through them again, and we're able to see that indeed there are holes here that are sizable holes. These are probably at least 20 feet high, and we want to see what's there. So when we dove down there, we found that there were wave-cut notches, just like you find sea level notches all the way around Bermuda today. At 375 feet, we found a wave-cut notch that dated back to 18,000 years ago at the lowest point of Ice Age sea level. So it was amazing. We went back in our time machine, and this was the edge of Bermuda 18,000 years ago. So if you wanted a waterfront lot, you had to get something right here, and you'd be right on the water. So this is what this ledge looked like. Nice white sand on the ledge, but very steep wall dropping off away into the depths. So this is Ice Age Bermuda and the edge of the island at that time. Our deepest dive was to 450-foot depths at Challenger Bank, and this was a real adventure. We're diving 25 miles or so away from land, out of sight of land, and water was exceptionally clear, amazingly clear. Even at 450-foot depths with natural light, we could see everything we needed to. We didn't need any artificial lights. You can see that there's a lot of life in this picture, but the side of Bermuda is just a vertical cliff that keeps dropping down into the abyss, into the deep sea. Lot to do, a lot to discover. We never found any deeper caves, but our dives were very short. So from the time we left the surface on a dive, we had 15 minutes until we needed to start our ascent and come back to the surface. So 15 minutes to go all the way to the bottom, to look around a bit, and then it was time to come up. Our ascent took typically over 2 hours. So quite an adventure diving here, and love to get back and explore more in this area. These were the deepest dives, to my knowledge, that have ever been done in Bermuda. Okay, let's move over to the dark side, unfortunately. serious problems exist in Bermuda. So these include deep well injection of wastewaters, dumping of solid and liquid wastes, rock quarrying and construction, and vandalism. So deep well injection means that wells are drilled down and liquid wastes are pumped into these injection wells. Problem is they're often pumped down to depths where a large number of the caves are. So the wastewater in the injection wells can go directly into the caves and affect the animals within the environment. This is some dumping that occurred about 30 plus years ago in a cave at the Government Quarry. So in Government Quarry, they had this large cave with a big lake in it, and they were going to quarry the cave away. So they were worried that if they quarried the cave away, when they blasted above the cave, all the rock would fall into the lake and disappear. So someone came up with the idea, well, let's bulldoze a bunch of garbage into the lake. And if we bulldoze the garbage into the lake, when we blast, the rock will land on top of the garbage and we won't have any problems. We won't lose our valuable rock. What happened though was when they bulldozed all this garbage into the lake, there was so much organic matter, it caused an overload in the system. The bacteria, naturally occurring bacteria here, began to decompose the organic matter, using up the limited amounts of dissolved oxygen that were present in the water. So the water went completely anoxic, and when this happened, the result was that all other living organisms died in the system. The water began to stink of hydrogen sulfide, very strong rotten egg smell. And within a few days, some other caves adjacent to Government Quarry Cave also had hydrogen sulfide appearing in them. And about a few months to 6 months later, another commercial cave, Leamington Cave on the island at that time, showed rotten egg smell and hydrogen sulfide. So it was like throwing a stone into the water. The ripples spread out and out and out. The pollution spread out and away from the site throughout the groundwater in that entire area. Another cave where we've done a fair amount of work in is called Bassett's Cave. Bassett's Cave is unusual because it's out toward the west end of the island. And in Bassett's Cave, there is literally a lake of oil. If you look in the upper picture here, there is some dark areas here. The dark areas are black because this is all a sea of oil. And if you throw a rock into this lake, you just hear a plop from it hitting the oil and sinking down into the oil. The oil is several feet or more, undetermined thickness, but this is a tidal lake. It's one of these cave lakes, so the water goes up and down in the lake and it pushes the oil up and down. And you can see on some rocks around the edge here in the lower left that you have a very clear high tide mark where the oil is left in a band around the edge of this lake. So not only was there tremendous amounts of oil pumped into the cave for disposal, but there are mountains of rubbish, including many barrels of rusted out waste. Now, this is on the grounds of the old naval annex in Bermuda, and the barrels here weren't empty barrels, they were full barrels. So what kinds of waste could you imagine the military would want to dispose of? say at the end of World War II or thereafter, we can see that there's a white powder that is in these. I've never had the powder analyzed. I don't know what's in it, but it's probably not anything very good. Cave that was discovered about 18 years ago was over in Wilkinson Quarry Cave over near the Grotto Bay Hotel. And when the cave was discovered, it was a cave that never had an opening to the surface before. And because of this, it had crystal all over it. It was entirely covered by active dripping crystal. The crystal was being deposited continuously. In most Bermuda caves, you have dry areas where the crystal is dried out and stopped forming. But in Wilkinson Quarry Cave, there was crystal everywhere. There was some very beautiful stalactites. Stalactites are formations that go out in an angle, basically, and defy gravity. So instead of going straight up or straight down, they go out to the sides, they corkscrew in all different directions, they grow horizontally, but they are amazing. And there were whole walls just covered with stalactites in this cave. There are also numerous soda straws, thin straws of calcium carbonate, calcite, that were the diameter, literally, of a water droplet. And the water that is flowing through these goes down a hollow central canal, forms a drop at the tip, and when it hangs there for a few seconds, it deposits a narrow ring of calcium carbonate. Then the drop falls away, another drop replaces it, and a new ring forms. So these take many hundreds or thousands of years to form. Also here, there's what we call cave bacon or cave draperies. And these are bands where water has been running down the ceiling of the cave. And as it does, it deposits a thin line of calcium carbonate. And depending on the mineral composition at various times, you can have bands of different colors. So also there's a large lake at the bottom of the cave, and we set up to do some exploration dives in the cave. So we came in with diving equipment, carried it down to the bottom of the cave, and at this point began our diving operations. We found that the cave was about 70 feet water depth. It extended for a considerable distance, and there were places where there was large numbers of underwater soda straws in the cave. So it was quite a spectacular underwater cave. We also did some collecting of animals within the cave, so we were interested in what was living there, and we found at least four species of critically endangered cave animals that were inhabiting this cave. So it was some very interesting biology, very interesting cave, but unfortunately it was located in the middle of a quarry. With the conservation officer, Jeremy at the time, Jeremy and I worked together in working to stop destruction of this cave. So we were successful then, but what we thought was going to be done with it and what did happen wasn't quite the same thing. If we go to Wilkinson Quarry today, here's what we see. This mound of rock in the middle is all that's left of the cave. So the entire cave, the circumference of the cave has been quarried away. At the time we visited, it was part of a hillside coming down, and all the way around it has been quarried away. Even the area above the underwater section of the cave, which is over in this area, is being taken down. So there is a proposal right now to the planning department to finish off the job and quarry away this last little bit of the cave that is remaining. And so the last couple of weeks, Miles and I worked very hard to put a opposition statement into the plan to develop the cave. And I'll tell you a little bit about what our justification was for this in just a minute. So this is what Wilkinson Quarry looks like today. This was taken about, a photo was taken about a month or so ago. So let's talk about, I mentioned that the cave animals are endangered species. So what is an endangered species? So there's certain criteria that an endangered species has to meet. So they occur in small numbers. They live in a restricted geographic region. And they suffer from threats such as habitat loss, climate change, or other hazards. So the danger they're facing is the danger of extinction. Extinction is a natural phenomena occurring at a rate of 1 to 5 species per year. However, today, our extinction rate has gone up to 1,000 to 10,000 times that much, and primarily this increase in extinction is due to human activities. The group that determines whether species are endangered or not is called the Red List. And this is a group organized by IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and they've put together the world's most comprehensive inventory of global conservation status of species by setting precise criteria to evaluate extinction risks. And they've set up a scale here going from totally extinct, so the species is completely dead and no longer exists anywhere. EW is extinction in the wild. Critically endangered means that it's on the threshold of extinction. Endangered is one level down. Vulnerable is one level below that. All of these are threatened categories. Then there, NT is near threatened, and LC is least concern. So there are very precise levels that scientists can use to justify which category animals fall into. In Bermuda, the Bermuda Planning Act states that the protection of caves shall take precedence over all other planning considerations, and the board shall refuse any development application or plan of subdivision if, in the opinion of the board, the proposal will have a detrimental impact on a cave entrance or underlying cave. So I have yet to find any country in the world or any legislation in the world that is stronger or better crafted than this legislation. I mean, it's as good as you can possibly get. It's very clear, very much to the point, and anything that has detrimental impact to a cave is prohibited in Bermuda. And Bermuda has gone a step further. There is a management plan for Bermuda's critically endangered cave fauna that was written by Annie Glasspool, prepared in accordance with the Bermuda Protected Species Act 2003. The primary goal of this management plan is to promote and enhance self-sustainability of Bermuda's unique cave-adapted fauna by ensuring adequate protection of the entire cave habitat. So protection of the entire cave habitat is the key part of this statement. So it attempts to set out standards that Bermudians can take to ensure that caves and everything associated with caves is adequately protected. So it sets to prioritize and evaluate threats to protect the entire cave habitat, identify and monitor contamination, evaluate the potential for breeding of cave animals outside the caves. So can we maintain populations in artificial conditions? And can we clean up and restore caves? So there's some very good laws, regulations regarding caves, protection of caves, and protection of cave animals. But basically, the bottom line is the only way to really protect cave animals is to protect the caves they live in. They have very narrow requirements that they live in certain environments. Still today, we don't understand why some cave animals are found one place and not another. So one of the richest and most biodiverse caves on the island is also an exceptionally tiny cave. So size doesn't make a difference. So one of the smallest caves is one of the most important caves with the most important animals. And there's a number of species that are found only in this tiny small cave that are found nowhere else, including very large caves that are 100 meters or so away. So why this is true, I have no idea. We really don't know. It's not a continuous habitat that animals can go from one cave to another willy-nilly. They're pretty much locked in to one particular place, but and don't have the ability to move between them. So my main project has been to search for new life out there, and when we find these animals, to preserve and protect them and make sure that they are here for future generations. So I have a website, cavebiology.com, that I'm in the process of revising and updating. So it's broken down quite a bit from where it was, but hopefully in the next few months over the summer, we'll do a lot more work and get that up to speed again. So this work that I've done in Bermuda is really a great number of Bermudians have helped me in this work. I couldn't have done it without them. So just so many people, so many organizations are absolutely critical. It's not a single person operation by any stretch at all. It's teamwork, and people have volunteered their time, volunteered their effort, and I just am so much indebted to these people for everything that they've done for so many years. So thank you so much. Especially I see Gil sitting there. Gil Noland has been my right-hand man in Bermuda, and he is the person I go to whenever I have problems or need questions answered regarding Bermuda. So that's the end of my talk right now. So I believe hopefully we have some time for questions. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have. I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Hey, Tom, thank you so much. You have brought caves to life again for me, and I'm sure for everyone listening and viewing. Yeah, I guess I'm overwhelmed and excited when I hear and see the work that you do, and I hope that everyone else has found the same. And I see, looking at the comments, this is one I personally felt very akin to. Amazing photos. I will never have the ability or the nerve to dive these underwater caves. So this is such a treat to see these slides and listen to Dr. Iliffe's wealth of knowledge. Thank you, Anne, for sharing that. It's so true. The photos are just unbelievable, and just to know we're in and around something so beautiful all the time is so special. Again, Gil did acknowledge you too at the early on, just to say welcome home, Tom. And I guess what I'm also going to try and do is get into some of these questions. There have been a few questions that have come in. I'm going to try and do them in no particular order, but Dr. Dorta Horsfield reached out with 2 questions. Tom, is it good to go?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
How concerned are you about ecotourism at Walsingham Cave? Visitors are allowed to enter the water and they might have sunscreen or other lotion on their body. Our cave systems are connected, thus these chemicals may enter the extensive cave systems. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, I think that, in my opinion, it'd be good if there, at the very least, that there was a sign saying to not to use sunscreens, not to go in the water if you have them on. But even better would be to not to have large numbers of people going in the water there.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I totally agree. I think that's something we're going to need to work on, is increasing the signage so that we can make sure everyone sees what's special and what needs to be protected.
I think some educational signs would be very helpful to explain that there is endangered species in the water here, that in order to protect and preserve these animals, we really need to work on preventing any further contamination or degradation of the water.
Yeah, totally agreed, and that's got to be a priority moving forward. Again, Dr. Horsfield had one more, or maybe 2 more questions. Have any of the cave species been raised in artificial environments, and how delicate are they?
The aquarium was able to keep some of the small cave shrimp, the Tiflatia shrimp that I showed you in one of my slides, live for a time. And they had actually the well that is pumping water up and supplying the tanks in the aquarium comes in large part from a deep water well that is pumping water out of a cave probably. And there have been a number of animals that have been sucked up. Unfortunately, there is an impeller on the pump, and it tends to grind up most of the things that get pulled up by the pump in the well. So I would like to see, if possible, one way to get animals without causing any further harm would be to figure out, do some engineering of the pump system at the aquarium so that animals could be protected when they come up and provide a source material for aquaculture.
Great. Thank you so much. Just a quick question here from Donna Nicholson. She was curious, what cave was it, the tiny cave with lots of fauna in it? What was the name of that cave, or where was it located?
Well, because it is so important and because it's so small, it would be very easy to adversely impact the cave. And so because of that, we have gone to the extent that we try to camouflage the entrance of the cave. We cover it up with a lot of dead bushes and tree limbs so that it's not readily available or apparent. And so in light of conservation issues and concerns, I'd rather not divulge exactly where it is. But it's somewhere in the Walsingham general area between Castle Harbor and Harrington Sound.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Tom. Dr. Iliffe, I really felt like that might be the case, but I thought it best for you to share that with us, because that is one of the hard things, as Dr. Horsfield said. We in Bermuda love to go swimming in a little cave. It's cool on a summer day. What percentage of the island has caves? That's coming from Fernando Alvarez.
Yeah, Fernando Alvarez is a colleague of mine from Mexico City, and I've done a lot of work with Fernando in caves around the world. So about roughly 10% of the island is area that's above caves, and some of these cave systems are quite extensive, but because of the dense population in Bermuda, many caves have houses and roads and other structures built over the top of them. In Mexico, just in the last couple of weeks or so, one of the major highways in Mexico collapsed in directly into a cave. So there's a lot of issues, not only here in Bermuda, but all over the world that affect directly caves and in direct effect the animals that are inhabiting these caves.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. Fernando has just written out to clarify his question. What percentage of the island surface is on top of a cave?
Roughly about 5 to 10%.
Okay.
Is above a cave. So that means that just a small part of Bermuda, Bermuda's a small island, the caves occupy a small part of a small island, and the caves, essentially, you can consider them caves, islands within a larger island. So when we go to the caves, we're visiting islands within an island as far as the animals, the biodiversity is concerned.
Well, Gil has reached out. I know we talked together a few weeks back, and he's asking, what is the next move on the planning application objection with regards to the Wilkinson Quarry Cave?
So that'd be a Miles question.
Yeah, I guess I can answer that to a certain degree. At this point, we have made our objection. Others have as well, including Dr. Iliffe, including the Bermuda Environmental Sustainability Task Force, BEST. And once those submissions have gone in, the people who've made the proposal, which in this case will have an agent by the name of David Summers, will follow with a response to our objection. And after that, the planning department will go through the process of their investigation. In some cases, there may be a need for an independent inspector. And at that point, it will be decided by the independent inspector how they lean based on the laws of Bermuda and the Planning Act in particular, the Protected Species Act, as was mentioned. And at that point, once those decisions come in, it is down to what the minister determines, which is what we call ministerial discretion. So that's what I believe is the process moving forward from here, Gil, and everyone. I hope that satisfies your question. If you go to the Bermuda Planning website, you can access all Bermuda proposed planning applications. And if you go to Plan 0239-20, you can go into the attachments section and see all objections and all letters and anything that was tabled there, including all of the work that was put into creating the objections will be there as well. So it's worth checking out. I encourage all Bermudians to take a look at that
Miles, why don't
it's a
you
valuable
put that
resource.
into the chat?
Okay, I'll put the planning website's always on my computer, so it won't take long. I'll put that up on the chat shortly. I'm gonna, while I try and organize that, I'm gonna get you to answer a couple more questions with regard to the planning, which is kind of what we're talking about. Why did the Bermuda Planning Act of 1974 not protect Wilkinson Cave? Now, that's an interesting question. Can you do that one, Tom, or shall I?
Well, And when it was discovered, the first knowledge of the cave came from apparently local stories around the island that someone came into a bar in Bermuda and brought a big stalagmite and set it down and was showing it to his buds there in the bar. And word got around, and Jeremy heard about it, the Bermuda Government Conservation Officer. He went out to Wilkinson Quarry, and he was first told that, no, there's no new cave here. There's nothing to see. And he persisted and eventually was taken out and saw the cave, went down, went in the cave, took some photographs, and then got in touch with me and said, hey, Tom, why don't you come over to Bermuda? We want you to take a look at the cave and evaluate it for us. So I did at that time. We submitted an objection to a planning application then, which was going to destroy the cave. And we had a cease order issued to the quarry to stop what we thought was the destruction of the cave at that time. However, it apparently wasn't well enforced, and this is a big problem with many laws. The laws can be great, but if they're not adequately enforced, then there's problems occur. So the cave, the area around the cave was totally quarried away, and only a small part where the dry cave was the only thing that was left or is left today. So nobody went and, I guess, followed up on what the situation was with the destruction of the cave.
So scary. Just a slightly different direction with this question, Tom. In a nutshell, what sparked your passion in cave biology? Because I know you shared with me that wasn't what you initially came to Bermuda to do.
So I finished my PhD, doctor's degree in Texas, and I saw an advertisement in a magazine for what looked to me to be a really cool job. And it was a job in Bermuda. And I says, wow, that looks great. I want to go to Bermuda. I've never been to Bermuda. Let's go there. So I wrote my letter of application, and it turns out that there were over 100 other people also wrote their applications for the same job. So it was a bit of competition. But as they were going through the applications, the person that was vetting them had happened to read a paper that I wrote when I was doing my master's degree. And so my paper, my application rose to the top of the stack. He went and called me up one day and he says, Tom, you know, we'd like to interview you for the position in Bermuda here. And I think, wow, I'm going to get a chance to go to Bermuda at least. Even if I don't get the job, I'll get a trip over there. And then he says, well, I'm coming over to Texas in another week, and I'll interview you in Galveston, where you are. And I says, well, okay. So he came over, and it turns out that that was all for the best, because my major professor in Texas and I took him out to a little Italian restaurant. We had a number of bottles of wine that night and got the guy drunk. And he says he ended up giving me the job. So I went to Bermuda, but I went to Bermuda to work on tar that was washing up on the beaches in Bermuda and do studies of tar. But one of my hobbies had been exploring caves, and another hobby had been scuba diving. So I went around to caves just for fun, just to see what they looked like. And I saw all these fantastic caves, all these deep, clear water pools, and it looked like there were tunnels and passages going off underwater. So I wanted to go cave diving. But since I wasn't trained in cave diving, I decided to get a close friend of mine from Florida who was a cave diving instructor, to come over and teach us a class. So he taught myself and several other local people a class in cave diving. And when we started cave diving, every single dive we did to do our course was diving in a cave that was totally unexplored and unknown. So it was an amazing time. I got certified as a cave diver with a local friend, and from then on, we went diving every weekend and oftentimes many evenings. And so when we went diving in the caves, we went down into the saltwater layer, the deeper water in the caves, and there was all these incredible animals swimming around. And I collected some of them, brought them up to Wolfgang Sturr, the director of the aquarium, director of the biological station where I worked at that time. And he was amazed and said, "Tom, you got to send these off and get them ID'd." And so I did. We found incredible new species, many, many new species. And from that, one thing led to another. I got multiple grants from the U.S. National Science Foundation that funded my cave research in Bermuda. And I worked in caves in Bermuda and then wondered, well, if all these incredible things are living in Bermuda caves, what about caves elsewhere in the world? And so I went to the Bahamas, to Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, to the Canary Islands, across the South Pacific, etc. So I had a great time diving, collecting, and making fantastic discoveries. So it was, I basically turned a hobby into a career. And my premise of doing this is if you want to discover new things, you've got to go to new places. And that's what I've done.
That makes complete sense. Curiosity, it didn't kill this cat. Good on
Not
you.
yet, anyway.
Yeah. Just another question here, it's a different topic again. Why would there be what looked like white beach sand in one of the underwater caves?
So the white beach sand, and this was on the poster that we sent out, is actually one of the Bermuda caves. It's a fantastic cave. It's like no other cave in Bermuda. So many caves in Bermuda are exceptionally different from others. And this is a cave that is down near the South Shore. It's in an area where you normally wouldn't predict caves to be, but it's a very beautiful cave. And I don't know whether there's an entrance coming in from the South Shore, perhaps, where sand, water is coming in from the ocean and percolating down into the cave, and over many, many thousands, tens of thousands of years, etc., it's been able to deposit in the cave. I don't know for sure, but that's as good as I can come up with.
Yeah, fair enough. Anne Hyde has had a few comments and a little questions still coming in. All environmental NGOs can help educate their network about the paramount importance of cave conservation and protection. Is there a video that you could share with us, besides the one the Team Heroes film, that some of us could use to help disseminate this information?
Sure, I've got another little video I can, I'd be happy to send to you. And
Yeah.
It was on Bermuda television, probably 10 plus years ago. Gil Nolan worked on helping me prepare it, and some other local divers. So yeah, we can probably get you that, I'm sure.
Oh, that would be great and much appreciated. I see Gil Nolan here just adding a little note, and I think it's an important note actually in regards to some things that have been discussed here. The Walsingham Trust, which oversees a lot of caves in that Walsingham area, has been making attempts to better control cave access to groups, and more effort on education may be useful. So that's exactly what Anne and certainly myself and Dr. Horsfield are promoting. And access to cave diving in Walsingham is by agreement with the trust for properly trained divers for scientific or educational purposes only.
Only, yes.
And you do need permission to be doing so. So
Yes.
I do appreciate that, but we need to make sure we get that insight out to the public as well.
And cave diving is a very dangerous, potentially very dangerous and risky activity. There's many people who have lost their lives doing cave dives, and especially people who aren't properly equipped or properly trained. There was a story that a friend of mine showed me that was written 30 plus years ago of a group that was going to go diving in one of Bermuda's caves. And so they went into the cave, swam underwater with just single scuba tanks, which are adequate for open water diving, but certainly not adequate for cave diving. They followed it in until they came up into a big air-filled room. It was a circular room. And as they came up, they looked all around in all different directions around the room. And they said, wow, this is pretty cool. And they said, well, I guess it's time to go out. And when they went back down, there were 4 or 5 different passages leading out in all directions. And they had no idea which passage they had come in on. So it could have been and nobody knew they were in the cave. If they made the wrong choice, it would have cost them their lives. So
I'd say
we need to be very cautious. The last thing we ever want to do is to have a fatality in cave diving in a Bermuda cave. Not only the loss of life, but the fact that it would very definitely adversely impact our access to caves and our ability to get into them and study them. We've had extraordinarily good relationships with a large number of landowners in Bermuda who generously allowed us access to their caves, basically almost any time we come over and request it, and have really promoted our research. So kudos to numerous landowners who have caves on their property and have allowed us access.
agreed. We're going to start winding up on the questions. I got a couple more though. David Brown is curious. He remembers that in the 80s there was a guy who did lots of cave diving exploration. He saw a slide show presentation at the Royal at the yacht club in town. I don't know the full acronym there. Does anyone have any access to his slides and the extensive maps that he made?
I have that. You're probably talking about a close friend of mine, Rob Power, and Rob was an extraordinarily active cave diver at that time. I dove with him. He was one of my primary buddies at that time. We did much of my work in biology. He was mapping the cave, exploring the caves, and he was extraordinarily enthusiastic, took a lot of photos in the caves. So we do have copies of his maps that he's done. We're now trying to go back and remap some of the caves that he's done. We've had some people here come in from overseas in order to do maps of the caves and have made some really exquisite new maps. So mapping is a never-ending project. You can always do a better map than somebody else. Not to say their map is bad, but it's like an artist painting a picture, a landscape. You can have many different artists paint the same landscape, and each of them can give you a very different impression of what the landscape looked like.
Awesome. Hey, this is one that I'm curious about too. Donna Nicholson coming back in. Just a bit curious. Have you found anything interesting, like real treasure, other than the flora and fauna that we've been excited to hear about tonight?
Well, we have in some caves, at the entrance of the caves anyway, we found old bottles. And so I have a collection of Bermuda bottles, including some very nice marble bottles, intact marble bottles from Bermuda. So that's one thing we found. But in other areas in the world, they found some amazing discoveries. In the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, far back in an underwater cave, a long way from the nearest entrance, they found human skeletons. And these human skeletons have been dated, and they date from more than 10,000 years ago, when sea level was much lower, and these were dry caves. So in Yucatan, there are no surface rivers or streams. The only source of water is in caves. They're locally called cenotes there, below the surface. And so some of the pre-Columbian, Indians who came to America, some of the first colonizers of the New World at that time, used the caves to find water or for other unknown purposes. Some of them got lost, some of them fell down holes or had other issues and couldn't get out. And here we find their bodies today. So there's a lot of interesting discoveries, archaeological discoveries, that are made not in Bermuda, of course, but in other parts of the world.
Wow, I'm just having a little chuckle here. Donna said, well, I guess not aliens then? No such luck.
Not yet.
Tom, I've been overwhelmed again. I've had the privilege of listening to you talk over the last 4 weeks quite regularly, and every time I walk away terribly excited about this precious space I call home. And I'm just so thankful for what you've provided, not just for myself, not for today and everyone who's got to listen, but for all of Bermuda, because I think without the work that you've done, we wouldn't get an opportunity to see pictures like the ones you've taken and get insight like that which you have. And I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone at the Bermuda National Trust for all the help you've provided in assisting us in understanding how to approach this objection, and allowing us to use your research as part of our objection has meant a lot. And I just want to remind everyone out there, I did share the planning website, and I know Jordan shared that you can find it on our website, our objection. So I encourage you again to get to our website, check that out. The Bermuda National Trust is working for everyone to save our protected national treasures. And we're so thankful that there are people like Dr. Iliffe who can provide the insight necessary to do so in an appropriate way with the appropriate understanding. So, Dr. Iliffe, I want to thank you again for joining us tonight. I want to thank everybody who came out and got to benefit from this beautiful presentation, and thank you for all your questions. They were all so valid. I was thinking many of them myself, and I don't know if you're seeing the chat right now. Tom, but there's a lot of thank
Yes.
yous coming through and a lot of excitement. And I want you to know that we're going to take this excitement here at the Bermuda National Trust and continue to share the insights that you've shared with us. And hopefully we can pass that on to some of our younger people in our camps and through our education and through the work that we do on a daily basis, because we know that this work is working towards changing things like climate change, and it's helping to change the way we see our planet and our special little island. So again, thank you.
So one last thing, thought is that I'd like to, hopefully, this current situation that we're in all over the world is going to ease up sometime in the future. I'd love to get back to Bermuda. I'd love to see everybody in person. And I'd like to see what, talk to Miles a little bit about this, but to work and get some young people involved in some cleanups of caves, some working maybe to put up signage relating to conservation issues, educating people who go around to caves such as in the Walsingham area of Bermuda. But I think there's a lot we can do, and we need everybody on board. We need everybody's support, and I want to thank you all for your attendance today and appreciate the opportunity of talking to you. I hope very much that I can talk to you all when I come back again sometime in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. Tom, if you could just stay on the line, I'm going to let our participants start to dissipate.